Okay, I thought I'd start us off with a little bit of a video. Welcome back to week 2. This will be the theory video I post for today, and if you're working on to next lesson, and then Friday, hopefully I will have planned some prac activities because theory is getting a bit boring. Okay, we're looking at modern art movements. The first activity I've asked you to do is to download that timeline PDF and paste the pictures on where you think they belong, but don't paste them down until you watch this because this will go through the right sequence. Okay, let's go. The first art movement was Impressionism. You may have heard of this, or I may have discussed it briefly. Impressionism was the first break from the traditional Renaissance style painting. It was the movement about capturing light. So the idea was to not so much capture an image, but to dot where the different lights and colours clashed. So that's why it's quite textured, the surfaces of the artwork. So main Impressionist artists to look at are Claude Monet and Renoir and Cézanne almost. Post-Impressionism was taking this idea of capturing light and really expanding and experimenting with it. Van Gogh is the main post-impressionist that we come to think of. It was the idea of really abstracting and having that subjective view of the world. So Art Nouveau, which is French for new art. Art Nouveau was pretty much a movement where they took a magazine and sort of stylized art or folk art as well, and created these really sort of different works. So it often referenced, like this one here references astrology. So a lot of them referenced mythology, and a lot of the works really looked at women because Art Nouveau came out at a time where societies were sort of blooming, like Australia was coming out. It was like in the 1800s. So each sort of civilization had like a woman who characterized their nation, like Britannica. And a lot of these Art Nouveau works really sort of were stylized on these sort of powerful and feminine women. Okay, next. Fauvism. This is the one we're going to look at in class more specifically. It's one of my favourite movements. It was a group of French artists that really pushed the boundaries about expanding with colour and texture and tone. Fauve or Fauvism, as Mr. Fletcher will call it. Fauvism is the French word for wild beasts, because they had an exhibition and some guy came in and went, "Oh, how terrible, it looks like it's been done by some wild animals." And that's how they picked up their name. So the main artists for Fauvism are Matisse, Henri Matisse, who I suggest if you like this work, go and have a look at his works. He's a really cool dude. And Andre Derain, who had a pretty rough life. He got hit by a car and died. Anyway, moving on. Expressionism. So as the word suggests, it's really capturing expressions and feelings and emotions in an abstracted way. Expressionists took the ideas from Impressionists, but they are two separate movements. Like, they might have happened at the same time, or they might be used by similar artists, like this is Edvard Munch, but the idea was to capture really strong expressions and using harsh and different colours and elements of design to express that. Cubism. So Picasso was a spearhead for Cubism, the idea of breaking things down into shapes and geometric forms. This was one of the first sort of real what the hell moments in modern art, because people were so challenged by the idea that, you know, it doesn't look pretty, it doesn't look like anything, but you can sort of make out that it's a person playing the guitar. But it was a pretty important movement during the modern art time. There's a few other artists that do work on Cubism, but when we think about it, the main dude is Picasso. Futurism. This is another really good movement to look at. So it was the idea of capturing movement. So this is Umberto Boccioni. Sorry. Someone's talking to me from outside. Oh no. And it was the idea of capturing people's movement. There are a few paintings that show artists, like there's one with a little sausage dog and his tail's wagging, and the artist has tried to capture that movement. So that is what it's about. So you can see with this sculpture here, like it's sort of looking at different perspectives and how the muscles have sort of moved, and you get that sense of kineticness and movement. Futurism is a really good movement to look at. I'm sure I'll bring it up later in class. Dada. Dada is the movement of pretty much questioning what art is and really challenging people by doing really stupid and unthought of things. So this work was done by, what's his name? Oh my goodness. It was done by an artist who, I'm just going to look him up because I forgot his name. Hold on. Can't believe I forgot his name. Marcel Duchamp. Sorry, he's the main Dada artist that we'll look at. He put a latrine, or a dude's wee pot, into an art gallery and signed a fake name to it in 1917 and put it in an exhibition. And people got so offended by the idea that someone was pretty much taking the piss out of art that it was destroyed 5 times. People would go in and push it over, and he'd just put another one in and sign it again. But it was that idea of, challenging what is art and what do people take for art, and why do we consider some things artistic and other things not. So that was a really important sort of stunt in art history. Marcel Duchamp has done a lot of other works. He's quite renowned. He painted a mustache on the Mona Lisa, and has done a few other funny things like that. So yeah, it's more of a movement of, like as the name suggests, taking the bit of satire and irony in art. Surrealism. I'm sure many of you have heard of surrealism, the idea about looking at the subconscious and dreams, and the main dude in surrealism is Dali, that everybody's known for, but there are a few other artists we will look at later, exploring that idea of dream-like states and non-reality based works. So you've got the Melting Clocks artwork there. Abstract expressionism. So this is Jackson Pollock, one of his works. The idea was to sort of just put paint and express yourself without it having to represent anything in particular. So what he would do is he'd get big paint cans and swash them around and make marks depending on how he sort of felt or what he was trying to express in a feeling. These works ended up, he was quite famous, and he Australia bought one. It made world history in the 40s. The Australian government paid $2.1 million back then, which would be a crazy amount now, for one of Jackson Pollock's works, which really sort of exploded the art purchasing scene in this country. The idea that, such a grand amount of money was paid for something similar to this work here really shocked and disgusted the public. But that's what art is about, challenging the norm. Right. Pop art, many of you would have seen pop art. Roy Lichtenstein did lots of works like this based on comic books, and then we've also got Andy Warhol. Many of you would know he did the soup cans and the Marilyn Monroe prints. Idea of taking images from popular culture and recontextualizing them in an art style. How are we doing? Oh, I've got 5 minutes. Okay. Minimalism. Minimalism is about breaking things down to their purest elements. Many of you would have seen this work. I think it's on the Silverchair album. I don't know if anyone listens to music. But it is, yeah, breaking things down into pure, minimal shapes. It was also a not just an art movement, but a design movement. So there are a few pieces of furniture and sculpture that really reference minimalism, the idea of just breaking things down to their purest form. So colour and line in this case. But yeah, looking at those elements of design. Earth art. Earth art was, obviously implicit in the name, going out and shaping the earth. So a really good earth artist or landscape artist to look at is, oh my God, I'm having a bit of a shocker since this morning. Andy Goldsworthy, here we go. Andy Goldsworthy takes earth objects and like ice and creates sculptures out of them, but a lot of these works are what's called ephemeral. Ephemeral meaning they don't last forever. They're only documented in photography. So this work here, for example, I can't really remember the name of the artist who did it, but it was called Sea Spiral, and the idea was he created this spiral, but when the tide rose, the work disappeared and would obviously be lost in rough seas. So that idea of, it looks really impressive, and he's obviously spent a lot of hard work and effort in planning, but the work would not last, only through documented photographic forms. Feminist art, this is a good one for all us girls. It is, and it's now more than ever, very important to recognise female artists in art history. I don't think many of you were here that lesson. I did a lesson with a few of you about, could you tell me 5 women artists, like their names, apart from Frida Kahlo, because everybody knows her, and I don't count. So that idea that art history has been written by men and is about men. Nude women account for almost 60% of most museum or art galleries catalogues, but yet female artists don't really make much of a show. But we're trying to change that. So feminist art was the idea of raging against the machine. The Guerrilla Girls that are the main artists that we'll look at. So that idea, they put out flyers and did stunts about being a woman artist and how we're not represented and the effects of that. Photorealism. I think this is the last one, yes. So photorealism is obviously it's quite implicit, photorealism making some painting look exactly to how it is in reality. So it's more about looking at the artist's techniques. Like it's an impressive skill to be able to paint photorealistically. Modern art really challenged that idea at the beginning, like we don't need to paint realistically anymore because we've got the camera now, so let's do something a bit different. But it sort of went full circle and came back and said, let's try and use the skill of painting realistically because it's a very technically challenging and impressive art thing to do. And you could also change things like the scale and the size and the texture just through using art materials to create a photorealistic piece. Okay, so that would have given you the sequence of the timeline. What you need to do now is the activities on the hub, and on Friday I will organise some practical for us to do. Okay, get to work.